The naive bride who hid a deadly secret, heirs, betrayals, and a love that defied conspiracies. Have you ever seen a bride so naive, people laughed before she even said "I do"? They called her a fool, said she didn't belong, that she was just a pawn, marrying a dying heir for status and convenience. But what if I told you that same bride was hiding a secret powerful enough to shake an empire? That behind her soft eyes and clumsy smile lived the only person brave enough to bring a billionaire family to its knees? This isn't a fairy tale. This is a story of betrayal disguised in pearls, of poison slipped into teacups, and of love that bloomed in the ruins of lies. A family ruled by greed, an heir on the edge of death, and a girl the world dismissed, who turned out to be the storm they never saw coming. So go ahead, laugh at the bride, underestimate her, but just know, when she finally speaks, she won't just expose a conspiracy. She'll rewrite the legacy of an entire bloodline. Would you dare keep watching if everything you believed about innocence was a lie? From the moment Lily stepped into the Weston estate, whispers followed her like shadows. Dressed in a plain ivory dress that barely reached her ankles, she looked more like a misplaced servant than the bride of a billionaire heir. Her wide-eyed silence only fueled the laughter behind polished champagne flutes. "She's the fool they chose," someone muttered. But Lily didn't flinch. She simply lowered her gaze and took another quiet step forward. No one saw her trembling hands as she clasped the bouquet tighter, or the way her eyes flickered toward Ethan's fragile figure slumped in the wheelchair. He looked half alive, pale as moonlight, his breath shallow and uneven. Lily's heart clenched, not because of fear, but something else, something strange and tender. You ever looked at someone and felt, deep down, that your life would never be the same again? The Westons didn't want love, they wanted an alliance. Her parents, desperate for status, had sold her hand like she was part of a dowry negotiation, promising she'd care for the invalid heir as if that were her God-given duty. Ethan needed a quiet, controllable bride, and Lily? Well, she was easy to underestimate. Everyone assumed she was simple-minded, a girl with more heart than brains. Mrs. Weston barely acknowledged her as she walked past. The cousins stifled giggles. Charles Weston, Ethan's uncle, whispered behind a cigar-stained grin, "Perfect puppet." But behind her soft eyes, Lily memorized every name, every glance, every sneer. They had no idea who they'd just let into their nest. No idea that the naive bride was already quietly calculating her first moves. She didn't say a word during the rehearsal dinner, just smiled, nodded, and played her role to perfection. Her silence wasn't submission, it was strategy. She noted who sat closest to Ethan, who refilled his glass without being asked, who pretended to care. She observed how the staff avoided certain hallways and how Charles always locked his office drawer after midnight. That night, in the guest room they gave her, Lily opened her small suitcase and pulled out a worn book wrapped in silk. Inside, pressed between the pages, were tiny sachets of herbs labeled in delicate script. A scent of camphor and ginseng filled the air. "Fool," she whispered to her reflection, "you'd be surprised what this fool knows." And her eyes burned with quiet fire. When Ethan finally spoke to her, his voice barely a whisper, he asked, "Why aren't you scared of me?" She smiled. The kind of smile that disarmed even the most arrogant men. "Because I've met scarier things than you," she answered softly, "and none of them wore silk pajamas." He stared at her like she was something he'd never seen before. There was something in his eyes, half suspicion, half relief. No one had ever spoken to him like that, not without pity or calculation. He didn't know whether to trust her or report her, but Lily didn't care. She wasn't there to play nurse. She was there to survive, and maybe, if fate allowed it, to change everything. And she planned to do it without raising her voice once. What no one knew, what no one even dared to guess, was that Lily had once trained under a miracle doctor in the mountains of Nevada. that she could read a medical prescription like others read fairy tales, that while they laughed at her slowness, she was studying every symptom Ethan displayed, every pill he took, every groan he muffled into his pillow. Ethan, frail and broken, was not the monster everyone whispered about. He was a prisoner inside a crumbling body. And Lily? She wasn't the idiot they thought she was. Not even close. She was a storm wrapped in silk and softness. And the Westons, well, they were about to learn that the most dangerous secrets are the ones hidden in plain sight. The Weston mansion, with its marble floors and oil portraits of long-dead ancestors. It more poison than a locked cabinet. While society praised the family's legacy, inside, rot spread like wildfire. At the center of it all was Charles Weston, the patriarch's younger brother. He believed power belonged to the loudest liar in the room, and Charles was loud enough to drown out any reason. To him, Ethan was nothing but a speed bump. He didn't care about Ethan's well-being or Lily's adjustment. He viewed the boy as a ticking clock, one weak pulse away from giving up the entire inheritance. Charles had built a web of influence over years. He charmed shareholders, made handshake deals, and slowly shifted pieces of the empire into his pocket. But Ethan's marriage complicated the equation. Lily was a wild card no one saw coming. Charles had planned to push Ethan out quietly, citing his medical condition, then install one of his sons in power. Behind fake smiles and manicured lawns, he forged documents and arranged secret board votes. He whispered lies in Mr. Weston's ear, always with concern. "Let me manage things until he's better," he'd say. But there was never a plan for Ethan to recover, only to vanish. His sons, Daniel and Marcus, were no better. They used Weston Industries like a private ATM. Lavish trips, fake deals, and extravagant purchases billed to the company. They mocked Ethan behind closed doors, calling him the ghost shareholder, and they bet on how long Lily would last, whether she'd run or disgrace them. But Lily wasn't playing their game. She was learning the rules to change them. She noticed discrepancies in reports and the sudden firing of loyal employees. At board meetings, she observed how eyes shifted during key votes. She stayed quiet, even sweet. But at night, she copied documents, stashing them inside dusty cookbooks in the West Wing. Every glance, every name, every ledger entry was cataloged. Lily was building something dangerous, truth. Charles grew impatient. He turned his attention to Lily, hoping to discredit her. Rumors were planted about her past, her credentials, her mental health. He hired a private investigator who found only fragments, silence, sealed records, and one cryptic note in an old clinic file. It read, "Promising, unregistered apprentice." That wasn't enough for Charles, but it worried him deeply. Mr. Weston, inside the compound, frail and nearly blind, leaned heavily on Charles for updates. The old man believed Ethan was resting, recovering with his sweet bride nearby. He had no clue the company he'd built was being sliced up like wedding cake. Charles made sure he stayed sedated, enough to smile, but not enough to question. And Lily? She made sure to document everything. While Charles plotted in boardrooms, Lily moved through corridors like a ghost. She tampered with his tea just enough to cloud memory, not cause suspicion. She overheard conversations through vents, bribed a junior accountant for access, and memorized the vault code Charles thought no one knew. She wasn't striking yet, but every day brought her one step closer. Charles believed he was playing chess against fools. But Lily wasn't on his board. She was watching from above, reading every move. He even tried to replace her with Vanessa, polished and press-ready, with ambitions as sharp as her heels. But Lily stayed, and Charles didn't realize the mistake until it was far too late to fix. She wasn't a puppet. She was the one holding the strings. And while crystal chandeliers sparkled and silver clinked against china, the Weston estate brewed with quiet rebellion. Lies echoed louder than prayers. But Lily's silence was no longer passive. It was loaded. Because when the curtain dropped, she didn't just want Charles exposed. She wanted the world to see who the real fool had been all along. And it wasn't her. Ethan Weston hadn't always been a ghost inside his own skin. There was a time not long ago when his laughter echoed through the halls and his sketchbooks overflowed with life. But that was before the crash, before twisted metal and smoke swallowed his parents whole, leaving him alone in a world that moved too fast. The limp came first, then the seizures, then the slow erasure of his voice in board meetings. The police report called it a tragedy, brake failure. No foul play suspected, but Ethan had read the files in secret. There were gaps, missing photos, altered times, a dash cam that malfunctioned. He was just a teen, too stunned to speak, too broken to fight the powerful men in suits. But he remembered one thing clearly, the look on Charles's face at the funeral. Too calm, too clean. Weeks after the funeral, Ethan collapsed during a school assembly. Then again the next week. Migraines turned to vomiting, then tremors. Specialist after specialist arrived, each more baffled than the last. Some whispered trauma, others hinted at toxins. The medications dulled the pain, but also blurred his mind. And behind it all, Charles whispered, "He's not fit to lead." Ethan watched from hospital beds as his name was quietly removed from decisions. Shares were temporarily transferred. Projects he'd once pitched were reassigned. With every piece he lost, it felt like his parents were dying all over again. His legacy was being erased, and his body couldn't keep up. But his mind remembered everything. He started keeping notebooks. First it was symptoms, then dates, then names, of board members, of doctors, of drivers. He mapped timelines like a detective. He cross-referenced every medical flare-up with family meetings and company events. Patterns emerged, and in the shadows of Weston Industries, Ethan began preparing for a war no one believed he could fight. Then came Lily. At first, he thought she was a spy, another puppet sent by Charles. She was too gentle, too calm. She moved through the estate like she didn't belong, but also like she owned it. He tested her, left pills untouched to see if she'd notice. She did. One night, he watched her swap his tea for a bitter root blend. The next morning, his hands didn't shake. He began pretending to sleep just to watch her rituals. She whispered over herbs, placed sachets under his pillow, rearranged his prescriptions in quiet defiance. He mocked it at first, called it superstition. But then his headaches eased, his appetite returned, the dreams stopped. And slowly, Ethan realized Lily wasn't here to care for him, she was here to protect him. They spoke little. Instead, they exchanged gestures. A notebook left open on the windowsill, a coded phrase slipped into a crossword puzzle. Over time, they built a silent language of resistance. She never asked about his trauma, and he never questioned her past. But both knew the other carried something heavy, something unspoken but shared. Still, fear lingered. Every time Ethan stood and the world spun, he remembered the crash. Every time he saw Charles whispering with a nurse, he braced for betrayal. The worst part wasn't the pain, it was the doubt. Was he being paranoid, or were they truly trying to kill him? He needed more than suspicion. He needed proof. And Lily, somehow, already had pieces. He once found her in the library, surrounded by documents she shouldn't have had. Old contracts, falsified lab reports. She didn't hide them. "You're not crazy," she said softly. "They've been poisoning more than just your body." And for the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel weak. He felt angry, not just for himself, but for his parents, for the truth buried with them. What Ethan didn't know, what he couldn't even begin to imagine, was that Lily's connection to that crash ran deeper than anything he'd uncovered. And while he mapped betrayals with ink and paper, she carried a secret in her bloodline that could either save him or destroy them both. It happened on a Monday. The sky hung low and bruised with storm clouds. Ethan hadn't spoken in hours. His skin turned cold, his breath shallow. The nurses whispered the word coma, as if saying it too loud might seal his fate. Charles stood at the doorway, already discussing funeral plans. And no one saw Lily move. She didn't scream, didn't cry, just stepped forward, calm and deliberate. From her coat pocket, she pulled out a silk-wrapped sachet and a velvet roll of acupuncture needles. "Get out," she said, not loudly, but with force. They blinked. She repeated, firmer now, "Out, or you'll answer for his death." The nurses hesitated, then obeyed. She locked the door, lit a single herbal stick. The scent of mugwort filled the room. Her hands moved with the precision of someone who had done this before. Needles slid into Ethan's neck, wrists, and ankles. She placed the sachet on his chest and whispered, "I won't let you go." Her voice cracked, but her hands never did. Minutes passed, nothing, then a twitch. His lips trembled, his brow creased, and then he gasped. It wasn't dramatic, there was no magical music, just one breath, then another. When the nurse returned hours later, Ethan was groggy, confused, but alive. New meds must have kicked in, someone muttered. Lily just nodded. Charles didn't buy it. His eyes narrowed. "Beginner's luck," he said through gritted teeth. But something about her movements unsettled him. She had known exactly what to do. Too exactly. Still, with no evidence, he returned to playing the gracious uncle. And Lily? She returned to fluffing pillows, quiet as ever. But Ethan noticed. That night, when the hall was quiet, he whispered, "Was it you?" She leaned in, kissed his forehead, and replied, "I just prayed." He stared at her differently now. Not like a nurse or a wife, but something else, something far more dangerous. She had seen his death coming and told it to wait. What no one knew was that Lily had once worked in underground clinics across the Southwest. She treated patients no hospital would touch. She used herbal medicine, acupuncture, and knowledge passed down from healers long forgotten. But one mistake, one scandal, and her name had been erased from the medical world entirely. Her mother had called it a curse. Lily called it training. She didn't need recognition. She needed purpose. And Ethan, barely holding on, had become her mission. In saving him, she remembered who she used to be. Not a pawn, not a wife for sale, but a woman who knew how to resurrect what others left for dead. Over the next few days, Ethan's body changed. His strength returned slowly, but noticeably. He spoke more, ate more, slept better. Doctors called it a turning point. Lily let them. She never asked for credit, but in private, she began planning, because this house wasn't just toxic. It was trying to kill the only good man left inside it. Charles and Vanessa kept close watch. They offered new medications, adjusted dosages, even gifted Ethan special teas. But Lily checked everything, smelled every vial, tasted every sip. Her silence was no longer camouflage. It was her weapon. Because now, she wasn't just surviving, she was preparing for war. The Westons dismissed the miracle. They filed it under coincidence. But Ethan didn't. Not anymore. He saw her now, not as the naive bride they laughed at, but as the storm they should have feared. And Lily, she was done playing the fool, because once you bring a man back from the edge, you're not just a wife, you're a threat. The Weston dining room sparkled under golden chandeliers, but beneath the polished surfaces, danger festered. Charles hadn't wasted a moment since Ethan's recovery. His toasts grew louder, his smile wider, but his eyes colder than ever. He couldn't let Ethan regain full control. If subtle manipulation failed, something darker might be needed. And poison was always Charles's favorite whisper. It began with tea, a new blend, delivered by a housemaid recently promoted. By Charles. Lily noticed it immediately. The scent was off, not bitter, but too smooth. She watched Ethan raise the cup, then knocked it from his hand. "Too hot," she smiled. But her eyes told him, never drink that again. Across the table, Charles froze mid-bite. Vanessa appeared more often. Draped in silk, always at Mr. Weston's side, claiming family loyalty. But her true mission was clear. Discredit Lily and replace her as the Weston figurehead. She spread stories to investors about Lily's unstable past, fake credentials, supposed mental collapse. And Charles backed every word, eager to dethrone the girl who had outsmarted him. Lily played her part. She feigned weakness, claimed migraines, allowed Vanessa to shine. But behind the scenes, she planted cameras in vases and bugs inside chandeliers. Every whispered threat was recorded, even the moment Charles handed Vanessa a sachet of white powder and muttered, "Slip this into the soup. End it quietly." That moment changed everything. Ethan grew quieter, not out of fear, but frustration. He wanted to fight, but still lacked the strength. Lily reassured him through notes, touches, coded glances. "Not yet," one note read. tucked inside his jacket. Let them think they're winning. And so they did, until their arrogance made them sloppy. Until they stopped whispering and started laughing. Charles arranged a secret meeting with select shareholders. He presented forged medical records claiming Ethan's health was rapidly declining. Then came fabricated psychiatric reports on Lily. His plan? Push through a vote to transfer power to Vanessa for the good of the company. He spoke of stability, vision, and cleaning up emotional liabilities. Mr. Weston, still weak but present, hesitated. Vanessa doubled down. She presented falsified prescriptions and claimed Lily had once poisoned a patient. "She's dangerous," she said sweetly. "Her kind of chaos spreads like a disease." It was nearly enough to convince him. Nearly. But Lily was already 10 steps ahead, watching from the shadows, with evidence in hand. She let it all happen. Let the signatures collect. Let the lies pile up, all while documenting every moment. She had photos of the white powder, audio of the threat, copies of every fake report. She organized it into a digital package, scheduled for release if anything happened to Ethan, or to her. The trap was already set. They just didn't know it yet. The night before the shareholder vote, Lily met Ethan in the East Library. She placed a flash drive in his palm. "It's time," she whispered, "but let them make the first move." Ethan nodded. No speeches, no anger, just cold, calculated readiness. Because they both knew this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice. At the next board dinner, Charles raised his glass. Vanessa smiled beside him. Across the table, Lily tilted her head and offered a quiet toast. To clarity. Everyone sipped, but only Charles paused. His tongue recoiled. Not poison, not death, just a bitter syrup Lily had swapped into his wine. Enough to make him sweat, panic, unravel. Because sometimes, the deadliest weapon isn't a dagger or a dose. It's doubt. And as Charles coughed, sweat dripping down his collar, Lily smiled. Not cruelly, but precisely. She wasn't there to kill anyone. She was there to expose them. And in that dining room filled with false loyalty, the poison had finally changed hands. The invitation shimmered with gold trim, sealed with the Weston crest. An exclusive banquet, in honor of the company's future, it read. But beneath the polished phrasing lay a carefully set trap. Charles planned to crown Vanessa as the new face of Weston Industries, a graceful betrayal. But Lily and Ethan had other plans. Plans dressed in silence and calculation. Ethan played weak. He slurred his words, dropped papers, and kept his eyes low during meetings. Lily leaned into the role of the scattered bride. She arrived late, wore mismatched earrings, and smiled too brightly. Behind the scenes, however, they trained like soldiers. Ethan practiced standing. Lily mapped escape routes and rehearsed exposure timing down to the second. The mansion became a battlefield disguised as luxury. Lily bribed the head chef, clearing his daughter's medical debt in exchange for access to the kitchen. Ethan installed a hidden drive in the projector system. Every hallway was bugged, every conversation tracked. "We let them win," Ethan whispered, "and then burn their victory to the ground." Vanessa beamed with victory. She ordered a custom dress, rehearsed her speech, and crafted tearful tributes to Ethan. "The brother I love," she rehearsed, while plotting his exit. Charles coached her. "Make them believe you care," and she did. Investors swooned. Shareholders smiled. The night was set. The performance rehearsed. But Lily had located the poison stash in the cellar. Tiny vials labeled in symbols, Charles's private supply. She swapped two with bitter syrup that mimicked the reaction but carried no danger. It was never about killing. It was about chaos. About watching Charles choke on his own schemes, publicly, spectacularly, irreversibly. Ethan kept practicing. 10 seconds of strength, that's all they needed. He leaned on Lily, rebuilt his posture. His legs trembled, but his eyes never wavered. "This isn't about revenge," he told her. "It's about making sure they never hurt anyone again." Lily nodded. She wasn't a bride anymore. She was a blade. The banquet arrived in full glamour. Candlelight danced across crystal glasses. Mr. Weston was wheeled in, barely awake. Charles greeted guests like royalty. Vanessa glided through the crowd, glowing. Ethan sat slumped, unmoving. And Lily wore pale blue silk, elegant, silent, watching everything unfold with a storm behind her eyes. Vanessa took the stage. Her voice was perfect. She praised Ethan's courage and Charles's wisdom. She spoke of new leadership, of unity, of legacy. The guests nodded. The cameras flashed. Then came the toast. Glasses lifted. Charles raised his with a grin. Vanessa followed, and so did everyone, except Ethan and Lily. Lily stepped forward, her glass raised. "To the truth," she said. The words sliced through the air like a blade. A pause. Then Charles sipped. Seconds later, he gagged. Not violently, but enough to draw eyes. A single cough. A stain of wine down his collar. Vanessa froze. The moment had arrived. Ethan stood, not perfectly, not smoothly, but with power. The crowd gasped. He reached into his coat and clicked a remote. The projector lit up behind him. Emails, audio files, photos, proof. "You wanted a future," he said. "Let me show you the truth behind it." The room fell silent as betrayal flashed on every screen. And in that silence, power shifted. Not with shouting, not with war, but with a man who refused to die and a woman who refused to be ignored. Charles didn't know it yet, but he had already lost. And the empire he built on lies was about to collapse, brick by golden brick. It wasn't a speech that silenced the banquet. It was a sound, the scrape of a chair leg on marble. Ethan stood. Not slowly, not shakily, but with the weight of legacy in his spine. The boy they dismissed now stood like the man they feared. Vanessa's smile vanished. Charles's grip on his wineglass faltered. Everyone turned. No one breathed. Ethan's voice cut the silence like a blade. "For years, I was treated like I was already dead. But the truth is, the only thing dying was this family's soul." He turned to Mr. Weston, gaze unwavering. "You trusted the wrong man, but I'm still here, and I'm done pretending to be weak." The air crackled. No one dared interrupt. Lily stepped beside him and handed him the remote. One click, and the screen lit up. Emails, recordings, time-stamped photos. A slide showed Charles handing Vanessa a sachet. Another revealed medical records, altered prescriptions, poisoned intent. One shareholder gasped. Another stood and whispered, "My God." The illusion was gone. Mr. Weston blinked at the screen. His mouth trembled. "Charles, is this true?" But Charles said nothing. Instead, he lunged forward. Security reacted too late, but Ethan moved faster, stepping back, unshaken. The frail air had become something else entirely, unbreakable. Charles froze, finally realizing the shift. Ethan's tone sharpened. "I know about the accident, the brake lines, the vanishing witness, the forged mechanic reports. You didn't just steal from me. You murdered my parents." Gasps rippled. Lily reached for his hand. He didn't flinch. "You used my illness to take control, but your control ends tonight." The room stayed still. Shareholders looked at each other, some ashamed, some afraid. Then Mr. Weston, voice clear for the first time in months, said, "Effective immediately, I transfer full control of Weston Industries to Ethan." Vanessa stumbled. Charles shouted. But no one moved. Power had already shifted. "You're making a mistake," Charles roared. "He's still sick. He's not ready." But Ethan stood tall. "I was sick," he said. "But you were the infection." The room murmured with agreement. The truth had cracked the foundation. And in that moment, no title, no wealth, no deception could save Charles from what came next. Lily handed out documents, confession transcripts, forged reports, shell company records. It was organized, unignorable. One by one, shareholders backed away from Charles and Vanessa. A few clapped, others whispered apologies, but no one stood by the traitors. They were exposed, naked, cornered, and afraid. Ethan didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stood in the stillness and let the truth speak for itself. The boy once pitied had just dismantled an empire, not with poison, but with clarity, not with rage, but with courage. And beside him stood the woman they once called a fool. But Lily's eyes drifted to the far end of the banquet hall. Near the antique case, a drawer sat slightly ajar, one she hadn't touched. Her pulse quickened. Inside, she found a photograph. A child, Ethan, smiling beside a woman he didn't recognize. On the back, a message. Ask her what she did the night your parents died. Justice had just been served, but a new question had taken its place. One that could unravel everything they'd just built. Because in families like the Westons, truth doesn't just destroy enemies, it also shatters allies. And Lily now held a secret Ethan wasn't ready to hear. Traitors never go quietly. As shareholders processed the revelations, Charles retreated to a corner, hissing orders into a burner phone. Vanessa stood beside him, her hands trembling. "Call Ricardo," Charles muttered. "We need the backup plan. Now." His smile had vanished. His voice cracked. Desperation had replaced confidence, and that made him dangerous. Within the hour, chaos spread across the estate. Security systems glitched, lights flickered. A blackout hit the banquet hall. In the dark, Charles's personal guards crept toward Mr. Weston's suite. The plan was cruelly simple. Cause a fall, fabricate a stroke, claim temporary control. But Lily had already seen it coming weeks ago. She had hired her own security team, private, silent, loyal, led by a former Marine who owed her a life. The moment the blackout hit, they moved. One assailant was knocked out before he reached the stairs. The other ran, but didn't get far. Every hallway was under surveillance, and this time, Lily wasn't the one being watched. Ethan was escorted to the boardroom, safe, or so they thought. Vanessa followed with a glass of water. "You must be exhausted," she said, her voice syrupy. Ethan didn't drink, he just stared. The scent of jasmine and something sharp filled the loom. Lily arrived moments later. Her eyes locked onto the glass. "Don't," she said coldly. Vanessa's smile cracked. "You think you've won?" she snapped. "You think this family will let a cripple lead?" She turned to Lily. "And you, still pretending to be more than you are." That's when Lily opened her bag. She pulled out a USB drive and dropped it on the table. "Let's see what you've really been up to." The projector lit again. Screens filled with bank records, payments to shell companies, connections to Charles's personal accounts, then voice recordings, Vanessa talking about final dosages and hospital accidents. One slide showed falsified prescriptions under Ethan's name. The room chilled. Even Charles looked stunned. Vanessa didn't blink. She screamed. Two officers entered the boardroom, badges gleaming, voices calm. Charles Weston and Vanessa Reed. "You're under arrest for attempted murder, corporate fraud, and conspiracy." Phones came out. Cameras flashed. Charles shouted. Vanessa lunged, but the officers were ready. They were dragged out, kicking, on record, on camera, in disgrace. Daniel tried to run, but Lily stepped in front of him. "I know what you did to your sister," she whispered. His face turned white. He didn't argue, didn't fight, just stopped, paralyzed. There was no proof yet, but the truth had been spoken aloud, and now it would never vanish. His day of reckoning would come. Lawyers stormed the mansion. Shareholders demanded votes, but Ethan and Lily stood still, side by side, tired, bruised, but unshaken. In the ruins of power games, they hadn't just survived, they had won. And yet, even in the quiet, something unsettled Lily. That drawer, that photo, that message, still waiting. Ethan hadn't seen it yet, hadn't asked, but Lily couldn't forget the words scribbled on the back. "Ask her what she did the night your parents died." Her heart raced, not out of guilt, but fear. Because she finally realized the past wasn't finished with them. It was just starting to speak louder. In a house once ruled by silence, the truth had finally begun to scream. And as the sun rose over the Weston estate, its new masters stood in the light. But even light can cast shadows, and what Lily carried now would either save Ethan again or destroy the only good thing they'd built together. The drawer creaked open like a secret begging to be heard. Inside, Lily found a faded photo of Ethan as a child, standing beside a woman he didn't recognize. Scribbled on the back, in delicate, shaky handwriting, "Ask her what she did the night your parents died." The banquet victory now felt like a pause, not an ending. Something deeper stirred, something dangerous. Ethan stared at the photo, brows furrowed. "Do you know her?" he asked. Lily didn't answer right away. She walked toward the window, holding the photo like it might burn her hands. Then, in a voice both soft and sharp, she spoke. "That woman was my mother." Ethan froze, and Lily kept going. "And yes, I was there that night." She pulled out a silk pouch she always carried. Inside were old prescriptions, clinic notes, a locket with 2 tiny photos. One of Ethan's mother, the other Lily's. "My mother was a private nurse, assigned to care for your mother during her last pregnancy," Lily said. Her voice shook. But something went wrong, terribly wrong, and it was covered up. According to Lily, Ethan's mother had uncovered something sinister. Someone was poisoning her father-in-law, Charles's father, slowly, through medication. When she threatened to go public, the car crash was arranged. "It wasn't brake failure," Lily whispered. "It was silence disguised as tragedy." Ethan's knees weakened. The truth wasn't just betrayal. It was blood. "My mother tried to stop it," Lily continued. "I heard the shouting. I saw strange men in our house that night." After the crash, her mother vanished, fired, blacklisted. And then she got sick, same symptoms as Ethan. "I became a doctor to finish what she started," Lily said. "To find the toxin, to find the truth, to find you." Ethan stumbled backward. "You married me for this?" His voice broke. "Was I just an assignment?" Lily's eyes filled. "At first, yes," she said honestly. "I needed access, the Weston name, the estate, the files." But she stepped closer. "Then I met you. And I didn't see a name. I saw a man, a wounded soul fighting invisible wars, like me." She knelt before him. "I let them call me a fool, a maid, a puppet. But I was watching, learning. And when you collapsed, I had a choice. Let you die, or save the man who unknowingly saved me." Ethan didn't speak. His breathing was heavy, torn between anger and awe. Lily took his hand gently. Waiting for a sign, he whispered, "Who are you?" She stood slowly, her voice steady now. "I am Dr. Lillian Ward, apprentice to the last miracle healer of El Paso, former head of the clinic for the forgotten and dying. I was erased because I knew too much, but I'm done hiding." Her words landed like thunder wrapped in silk. The Weston elders stood silent nearby. Lily faced them. "You killed my mother. You tried to kill Ethan. You stole a legacy and called it business." Her voice didn't tremble anymore. "But tonight I return what was taken, and I bury the lies with the same fire you tried to burn me with." No one dared interrupt. The banquet hall felt different now. Not like a battlefield, but like a courtroom. Lily wasn't pleading, she was sentencing. And Ethan, still holding the photo, finally understood. She hadn't just saved him, she had avenged an entire generation. But justice, like truth, demands something in return. And Lily was ready to pay that price. Because she knew what came next. She had another secret. One she hadn't even whispered. Not to Ethan, not to herself. One she'd buried deeper than any drawer. And soon, that secret would rise. And with it, the final test. Not of strength or strategy, but of love. The Weston estate was no longer a sanctuary of power. It had become a crime scene of whispered lies. Lawyers, reporters, and investigators walked through its halls, gathering what remained. The once glorious name now scrolled beneath headlines beside words like fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. But inside those same walls, something sacred had begun to bloom. Not revenge, not victory. Something softer, love. Ethan barely slept, not from pain, but from clarity. For the first time, the weight on his chest had a name, a motive, a face. Lily never left his side. No longer seen as the naive bride, she was the warrior who pulled him from death. Every room she entered fell silent, not from fear, but respect. Even ghosts seemed to pause in her presence now. They didn't speak about love with fancy speeches. No proposals, no fanfare. Just quiet moments, tea by candlelight, reading transcripts in silence, holding each other through memories that cut deeper than any blade. And when Ethan broke down, reading his parents' final autopsy notes, Lily simply held him, saying nothing. Because silence said more. Their love wasn't built in comfort. It was born in battle, forged in poison, fire, betrayal. And yet, it was real, stronger than any contract, more sacred than any inheritance. "You saved me," Ethan once whispered. But Lily shook her head. "We saved each other," she replied. And it was true. Because before Ethan, she had forgotten what tenderness felt like. Ethan returned to the boardroom, not as a patient, but as CEO. Shareholders once loyal to Charles now stood and applauded. Lily stood at his side, name cleared, credentials restored. Together, they unveiled a new Weston Industries, one focused on ethical leadership, medical reform, and restitution to those Charles's greed had harmed. Redemption was now policy. Before signing the final contracts, Ethan did something unexpected. He removed the wedding ring chosen for him by the family, cold, heavy, impersonal. Then he turned to Lily and handed her a new one, simple, honest, a symbol of choice. "This time, I choose," he said. Lily's hands trembled. "And I choose you," she whispered back. There was no applause, just emotion, raw, real. The room changed in that moment. The legacy shifted, not because a new heir took control, but because love had rewritten the ending. Even the oldest board members looked away, hiding tears. Redemption had entered the house, and it wore no mask. Ethan and Lily didn't stay in the mansion. They sold it. Donated the proceeds to fund clinics for undiagnosed illnesses. They bought a modest home by a lake. Ethan painted again. Lily opened a healing center in her mother's name. The empire didn't crumble. It evolved, because power in the right hands can be reborn into purpose. Of course, scars remained. Trauma doesn't vanish. It adapts. Some nights, Ethan still woke up gasping. Some mornings, Lily stood too long at the window, staring into memories. But they faced it together. Not as survivors of a war, but as builders of a future. Equal, whole, and deeply, completely human. On their first anniversary, under the rustle of trees and a sky full of stars, Ethan took her hand and said, "Thank you for pretending to be the fool, so you could become my miracle." She smiled, not because she believed it, but because she knew he did. And sometimes, belief is all we need to keep going. Far away, in a prison cell, a letter sat unopened, addressed in shaking handwriting. It held a truth neither Ethan nor Lily were prepared to face. Because even when you think the story is over, life always finds a new chapter. And the next one would test their love like never before. Sometimes, the most dangerous people in the room are the ones no one sees coming. They smile, they stay quiet, they let the world mock them, until the moment comes to show who they really are. Lily was never the fool. She was the answer to a legacy built on lies. And Ethan? He wasn't the sick heir they all pitied. He was the flame that lit justice in a house full of shadows. But tell me, if you had to choose between revenge and love, between exposing the truth or protecting someone who hurt you, what would you do? Do you believe the heart can forgive betrayal? Do you think love can survive the weight of secrets? Let me know in the comments. Would you have trusted Lily? Do you think Ethan made the right choice? Or was there still one more truth left untold? And hey, if you felt something with this story, if it made you hold your breath or wipe a tear, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. There are more stories coming, and some of them might just feel like they were written for you.